Sipes is going to be talking about Thunderbird, the death and rebirth of the OSS project. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Now, before I get started, one thing I wanted to ask is if we could all give a round of applause for the organizers and volunteers running this event. This is clearly a labor of love for them, and it really shows. So, my name is Ryan. I began at Thunderbird as the community manager. And let me think about this. What do I want to say here? It's been a journey. It's been a crazy journey. It's been ups and downs, left and right, whatever you can describe for I like to think of it as a hero's journey, you know? But it's been a wild ride, and you guys are probably getting the best firsthand accounting of it here today. But before we get into that, I want to tell you what we're doing for you, okay? So Heather right here has worked on GNOME system tray support, which should be landing very soon in Thunderbird. And some other things that we did this year is FlatHub support. We adopted our Flatpak. We're now taking care of that, making sure it's up to date. It's really great to have an option beyond here's a tarball for when we're asking folks to use Thunderbird on Linux. We also did snap support. Well, Heather once again did that. And then we have native Exchange support, which I know Exchange is gross, but it'll be one of, by my count, 2 or 3 Linux email applications that actually natively support Exchange. So I just wanted to call that out. And then the most fun part of this is most of our developers are Linux users. And we're very excited to say that 2024 and 2025, we're going to increase the support for Linux platforms in Thunderbird. So that's really interesting and fun. Okay, who am I? Ryan Sipes, Managing Director for Product at MZLA, which is the Mozilla entity that Thunderbird lives in. International Man of Mystery? Bird lover? I don't know. Maybe you guys will find out today. So I joined the Thunderbird project as its community manager in 2017, part-time on contract. I was never intending to be working on Thunderbird for more than a year or two. I thought the community was interesting. The product was interesting. One thing that I thought about a lot when I was at System 76 is I was community manager over there, and these organizations would call me and be really excited, and they would say, we're deploying Linux across either our entire organization, or they would say a specific group, like all developers are now going to be running System 76 machines with Ubuntu on it. But the question that would come up in each of those conversations was, they all are moving to these Ubuntu laptops. We've been using Outlook. What's the one-to-one replacement on Linux? And I started looking into that and testing all these different applications that ran on Linux. And what I would tell them was Thunderbird because it was the closest. But in reality, it was not a one-to-one replacement. And so when I saw that they were looking for a community manager, I thought I was like super hot stuff. So I was like, I'll go over there and I'll fix this up, you know, and then it'll all be great and balance will be restored to the force. And this 7 years later, I'm still working on it. So there you go. But yeah, that's me at Thunderbird. Now, Thunderbird probably shouldn't still be alive. In fact, when I joined, one of the most common questions that I got. Not just from normal Joes, but from people who are plugged into open source software and everything. And it was, Thunderbird, isn't Thunderbird dead? And it was a good question, actually. This was in 2012. There was an article declaring the death of Thunderbird. And Mozilla declared that it was shifting its focus away from the email application to other things. I have a quote here. In summary, we've been focusing efforts towards important web and mobile projects, such as Boot to Gecko, while Thunderbird remains a purely desktop-only email client. We have come to the conclusion that continued innovation on Thunderbird is not the best use of our resources, and given our ambitious organizational goals. And this is from JB, managing director of the Thunderbird team. So yeah, you could excuse people for thinking that Thunderbird was dead. And here are some reasons Thunderbird might actually have been dead. No one was employed to work on the project. Thunderbird was frequently in an unbuildable state. I remember getting there and we had what were called red tree days, where upstream broke us, and red tree days were really gracious, because usually that actually meant red tree months, where we couldn't build Thunderbird for a very, very long period of time. There was no clear vision or roadmap for the future. I say that there were still active community members, but there just was not this driving, like, vision that they all shared. They weren't going anywhere in particular. And as many of you have already asked me about today, there was no sustainable funding source. So, but, okay, I'm standing here talking about Thunderbird, so clearly it wasn't truly dead. And there's this quote, "Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Mark Twain, but more famously Thunderbird." Yes, Thunderbird wasn't dead. It still had an active community. This is the applause line where everybody says, "Woo! Thunderbird! Community!" Yeah, thank you. You guys are going to have to get better at this. I'm not going to tell you every time. So that takes us into the rebirth of Thunderbird. Oh, yes. So this was my mantra when I started Thunderbird. Is there sound to this?
What is dead may never die. What is dead may never die.
Well, you can't hear this because it's on my laptop.
What rises again. Harder.
Wait, let me try something. Yes.
What is dead may never die. What is dead may never die. What rises again. Harder and stronger.
What is dead may never die. I repeated that all the time. After I started Thunderbird, they're like, "This isn't going to work." And I was like, "What is dead may never die." Okay, let me get my mouse back here. Nope, I don't want to see this again. Okay. All right. Well, that's all well and good. We're here now, and we'll talk about what that looks like. But how did we do it? How are we still alive and thriving? It's a little bit of a spoiler, but... Well, first, we set up some governance. Mozilla wasn't going to steward the project anymore, so we created a body that would steward the project. The Thunderbird Council, pictured here. For those of you who don't know, that's a Jedi council. You see Yoda back there. That's how you know. Okay, so the council played a pretty big role in saving Thunderbird. And what can you draw right now from the council that you can apply to an open source project? I'll tell you. It created stewards of the project. Why is that important? In any project that is going to be successful, an individual or group of individuals have to have responsibility for that project. Unassigned responsibility means a project is going to die. There's just no question about that. One other thing that it did is the council was an elected body from the community, so it created an openness that actually re-energized what was really a low morale project. Okay, you get spun out from Mozilla, no more money being spent on the project. That's very bad. That is like circling the drain type of project. However, creating a body of elected contributors to shape the future of the project, well, that's re-energizing. Okay, all right, we can get together, we can figure out some of these problems. So openness, important there. And it ensured that there were decision makers, ownership. A little different than responsibility, because everyone in the project may feel responsibility for it, but at the end of the day, somebody has to say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, where we're going to focus our efforts. And then the last thing that they did was they hired me. OneNote. Okay. So you're like, Thunderbird Council, great. They're going to change everything. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be flowers and sunshine forever. Good governance, even the best governance, is never pretty. I can say this pretty unequivocally. Maybe it's different in GNOME, but so far let me think about this. Okay. So been in open source communities since I was 12, all right? And that's been a long time. I'm 34 now. I have yet to be in a community that works, that doesn't have any sparks flying every day, real debate happening. And I will say that if you look back on Thunderbird's mailing list at this time, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Constant arguments, constant, I don't know, competing visions for the future. But what I'm telling you is you have to have that in an open source community for things to actually move forward. If you don't, then the project is probably stagnating. And then I know from everybody's questions, what you all want to know about is my question after I'd been there a little bit and my contribution. So shortly after I joined, some article shared Slack's daily active user number. And I looked at it, and it was around 10 million daily active users. And I looked at ours, and with the exception of the summer, when all the Europeans disappear from using Thunderbird, we also hovered around 10 million daily active users. And I saw some other thing that Slack produced, that their revenue was $1 to $2 billion at the time per year. Ours was on track that year to be $500,000. And I thought, what? How is this possible? Daily active users, we know from what telemetry we do have that Thunderbird's really sticky. People are in it from 4 to 6 hours a day. So it's like very important. What is happening here that we are going to die? That Thunderbird is going to slowly just disappear from the world. And so I started asking, like, why aren't we sustainable? To which there was no good answer, but I kept asking it. And we did some things. And we've become pretty sustainable. This is another applause slide, just so you know. That's that first year that I was there, and that actually came in a little bit better because we tried some things, $700,000. This is last year at $9.1 million in revenue. Just so you understand, that is an 1,100% increase over that time. Okay, yes, we understand. How did you do that? Okay, I'm getting there, okay. It was actually really simple. I kept trying to think of all these super complicated ways to make money for Thunderbird. And all of them were pretty bad ideas. Or we would try them and it'd be like, yeah, okay, you could go sign up for a new email address in Thunderbird. Maybe some of you knew that. Probably most of you don't, because I have the telemetry numbers for how many people did that, and it's very low. And we made like $1,000. And so that didn't work. So we kept trying things. And then finally I was like, well, okay, crazy idea. What if they don't know that Thunderbird is going to die? And what if we just like slap it like right in their face? And that's what we did. This, you can see this first appeal. And what I heard as I pitched this idea was asking for money is so uncool, or some version of that. Got a lot of feedback that people just didn't feel comfortable asking the users for money. They said it's spammy, it's tacky, it feels like early shareware. And I was like, and it took a while for me to figure out how to have that conversation, because I was like, yeah, it does. It doesn't feel great to like be like, give us money. But then I thought, as I was talking to users and they would tell me how important Thunderbird is to their daily like work and like their life, I realized we were kind of talking about the wrong thing. So my question back to them, which is more cool? We ask for money twice a year, or Thunderbird goes away forever? Then we started getting somewhere. Then people were like, well, yeah, I guess that's true. And one thing that open source doesn't understand, because so many of us folks are doing this for ideological reasons, is, well, we'll get into a lot of those, but one of them is that anything you do does not have as much impact as you think it does on your users' lives. Case in point, I take over Thunderbird with a big thing that pops up in your face that you have to exit out of, asking for money. Let's go back to that slide. Nope, I'll get there. This popped up full screen. There's more to it than this. It says, help keep Thunderbird alive. This is taking up your whole screen. Did you know that less than 1% of Thunderbird users fund all the work we do? Not too long ago, Thunderbird was on the verge of extinction. You can all see this is all bold. It's because of donations from a small group of users that we're here today. We don't show advertisements or sell your data, and we are completely funded by donations from our community. Okay, so really aggressive kind of appeal. And that popped up on every single of our approximately 20 million total user base screen. And I went around afterwards, did a bunch of user surveys. What did you think of the appeal? What appeal? It popped up, it was a whole thing. Like you had to exit out of it to get around it. Bro, I do not know what you're talking about. What is going on? I know it hit our users. What happened? So I figured it out. Okay. So, users are so accustomed to seeing ads and promotions and upsells in applications that one a year it did not trigger at all in their psyche. You either gave or you clicked X, and that was a 2-second transaction in your day. So, this stuff is not as annoying as you think. Still, we are coming off of doing 4 appeals over the last 12 months. Okay, 4 full screen appeals. Still, many of the users I ask, because I have it in my list of questions, say, I honestly have never seen what you're talking about. So far, we have not hit any kind of fatigue around the in-app appeals. Okay. So that's raising money, and we'll talk more about that. The third one, everywhere I went, Thunderbird is dead. Thunderbird is dead. Thunderbird is dead. Thunderbird is dead. I know, Thunderbird is dead. Okay, thank you. Had to change that. Another thing open source projects aren't really good at, a lot of open source projects. Owning their image, their brand, the perception of their project. I know that that's a challenge because a lot of folks who are building open source software are developers first or engineers first. So it's not a innate skill that a lot of folks possess in this space to tell a story about the application that they're building or the project that they're building. This was Thunderbird's story when I came. It was a lot like this picture. Thunderbird was perceived as old, a little confusing, and parts of the interface looked like they were from a different era. My job, as I saw it, was to tell this story. It's a little dangerous, yeah. It's cool. We're a cool, scrappy community, taking on the empire. Outlook, and we look damn good doing it, don't we? Yeah. So to do that, I kept looking at, I should have put it up here, the old logo. I kept looking at that logo, and every time I just saw a wig on top of an envelope. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I was like, this is not the future. This is not even today. Like, something's wrong. So despite everyone telling me, don't do this, I was like, we need a new logo. Like, don't do this. Everybody knows the logo. It's fine. People be confused with something new. But I was like, if we don't change this thing, everyone already knows what Thunderbird is. They know what it is. They see the logo, they know what it is. They know what's inside of it. Even if we change everything, even if we're not even an email application even anymore, we're just a Bitcoin wallet or something, they're gonna see that and they're gonna be like, I know what that application is. I used that in 2004. I know what that looks like. I know what that experience is like. So fundamentally, we had to tell them, no, you don't know what this is. You've never seen this bird. Is that an egg? We don't know. You don't know because we don't know. So we rebranded, we got a new logo. And then the other thing we did, which once again, like nobody understood, but we gave that next release a really fancy, cool name. They're like, what does it mean? I'm like, I don't know. Since then, people have like given it meanings like, oh yeah, it's blowing everything up and there's a supernova and everything will come back together into something beautiful. That's not why it was named that. I was just like, this just sounds cool and people will want to know more. But we did real things besides just rebranding. When I asked folks like, people who are coming and using Thunderbird and leaving, I would try to grab as many of them as possible and say, well, why didn't you stick with Thunderbird? It's kind of a weird, like, who are you? Like, where did you come from? Why aren't you using Thunderbird? And they would be like, well, honestly, it looks like it's from 1999. I was like, yeah, you're not wrong. So in this release, we decided we're going to just destroy expectations, like change the user interface as much as we can. Not without purpose. Like we didn't just change it arbitrarily, but we said we know where we're not maybe the best, most modern experience. We can bring that into 2020, I guess this would have been 2023, into 2023, and create an experience that matches expectations for what a user interface is in this year. So we told a new story. And it worked out. Years go by, years go by, years go by. This is Supernova, and that's our user base ticking up. So it worked. And we've continued that. This is our release that just came out 4 days ago. The 10th. The 12th. 7 days ago. Yeah. And we continued that work on the user interface design. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that really cool? Okay. So I'm 30 minutes in. Do I need to stretch this out longer or do I need to make it shorter? Here we go. Lessons learned. What you can take from this and apply to your own project. If you want to be successful as an open source project, it's not just about the code. I'm sorry. That is just it. You know, there's so much more that drives what decisions users make about the applications and the software that they use. It sometimes has absolutely nothing to do with the code quality, the language that it's written in, the cool thing that you manage to do that no one else does on the planet. That's not actually how users make decisions, or a lot of users make decisions about the software that they use. There are other elements to that decision-making process, some of which are intangible. They're not based on the quality of the software. But some things that we can implement as a wider open source community that can change open source for the better. One is that governance matters. Now, no matter what happens to our revenue, no matter what happens to our leadership, no matter what happens to Mozilla, no matter what happens to MZLA, Thunderbird will likely continue to exist and continue to grow and continue to change or continue to die, but they will exist. Why? Because we have a governance structure that is for the project that is independent of anything else. So as long as there are people showing up to develop the software, there will be elections that will be held to determine who leads the project, and that will continue to provide a structure for the project to exist regardless of what happens. So when I think about longevity of open source software, this is one that I think about quite a bit, which is like, okay, you're maintaining this piece of software, like, what happens when you, I shouldn't say get hit by a bus. Lots of other things could happen, lots of good things. We have maintainers all the time who have kids, and then we have to find a new maintainer for the thing that they maintained. So, okay, you have kids, all right. Like, you want to create the structures in your open source project so that the project can continue and do good things, even if you're not present. Okay, and I put under here, it isn't always pretty. Just a reminder, if you're like in a project and you have a governance system and there are arguments and stuff, I need to tell myself this sometimes too. Sometimes you just need to sit back and be like, this is like how human beings collaborate and come to answers and come to decisions, and like, that's okay. It's okay. Sometimes it's not okay. Code of conduct, like, you know, there should be a little bit of rules of the road, but like, if two people just disagree on how a specific feature would work, that's healthy and that's good, and hopefully if you have the right rules of the road, a better decision will come out of that process than otherwise. Okay. I don't know who needs to hear this. Somebody in this room needs to hear this. Money is not necessarily bad. And let me give you a reason. Because at first this was just a slide that just said money is not bad. And then I thought about it and I was trying to think through like what's how do I back that up? There are some jobs in an open source project that are either extremely difficult or so draining that it is very hard to get someone to do it for free. No one has ever, in the history of Thunderbird, updated the IMAP code for free. It has never happened. No protocol code has been updated, to my knowledge, by someone who is volunteering. Do you want to know why? You were talking about it earlier. It's like 600 pages of RFCs. Who wants to do that? That is not like, I'm going to get my whiskey, I'm going to sit in my chair, and I'm going to read through the RFCs tonight. Like, no, it's not sexy work. You never get thanked for it. Yeah, it's sad, but it's true. And so, in that way, it's good to have money, especially if you have a user base that you can draw some money from, to tell them what it is that you want to do and to ask them if they want to support that so that you can tackle the big, hairy projects that are really difficult to get a volunteer to do. And the last thing on this point, I feel like as someone who loves open source software, like with a deep burning passion, we all need to learn this a little bit better. When I was pitching this to the Thunderbird Council, the Thunderbird community, I got so much pushback around money, around just trying to get money to move the project forward. And it was kind of eye-opening because the advantages of the software we're competing against is that they don't hold our values, and they're deploying a lot of resources toward promoting, in some cases, the antithesis of our values. And if we're not willing to use a tool in the toolbox in order to compete, then it is our destiny to get left behind forever. So anyway, on that positive note. The last one is own your story. The last thing to learn from this. I began this talk with someone else telling Thunderbird's story. The little bird with the X over its eyes, it looks like that's it for Thunderbird. That was the story. And no one tried to tell another story. That was just the story, and it was allowed to live from 2012 to 2017. Of course, that's not the story. I remember conversations with developers. We're here. We're developing the software. Everybody knows that. Like, because we're here and we're doing it. No. No. Nobody knows that. So we end with Thunderbird telling the world what its story is. We're alive. We're thriving. I'm here today. I'm inceptioning this into your head. Like, we are the open source email client that's taking on Outlook, that's taking on Gmail, that's taking on the proprietary applications that are out there that allow you to access your email in order to show that there's a better way. There's a better piece of software that you can use to accomplish something that you need to do every day, which is manage your email. But, okay, the last piece of that story, so you all can tell all your friends. Our values are our users having a good experience, not a good experience as in UX experience, as in no dark patterns. We're not going to show you ads in your inbox. We're trying to help you, the user, accomplish the thing that you want to do with the least friction and the least moral compromise possible. That is the Thunderbird story. owning and telling your powerful story consistently is a big part, and perhaps the biggest part, of shaping reality to match your project's dreams and ambitions. The end. That is it. And I think about GNOME, and I think about this trend that has happened ever since the inception of GNOME, where we roll out a feature on the desktop, and we're like, this is so cool. This is so cool. And then 8 years later, Mac or Windows adds it to the operating system, adds it to their desktop experience. Okay, well, what story should GNOME be telling? You know, I don't know, spitballing here, I did not think of this before, but, you know, like, an example of this would be like, GNOME, it's the next generation desktop, always. It's always the next generation. What you see here is what's gonna be there in the future. Like, that's badass. That's a story GNOME should be telling every single day, or some story like that. Letting people know, you're a developer, you think you're cool? You're not cool. Are you on a next generation desktop? No, you're not. I'm not today, I'm sorry. My other laptop broke, and so this is the backup. So I'm part of the problem right now. But as I was sitting today, watching everyone using GNOME, while I was stuck on this, I was like, that looks so much cooler than what I'm doing over here. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Cool.
All right, here we go.
First of all, thanks for coming. That was awesome. I have two questions. One's kind of geeky. How is the council elected? Like, who can stand and who can vote? And the second one is, are there any, obviously there are positives to having money and hiring people and getting stuff done, which is super cool, and I'm in awe of what you've achieved, but have there been any downsides to the project and the community?
I didn't catch the second question. Can you repeat it?
Has money caused any problems for you? Right? Has having the money in the budget had any negative effects on Thunderbird or the community?
Still maybe a little bit closer. I'm so sorry. Had to get like near the speaker here.
Has money caused you any problems? Any downsides to the community?
Oh, any downsides to money?
Yep.
Oh. I know why I couldn't hear that question now. Sorry. Okay. Council. First question is, who can stand for council? What are some of the things that determine that? The council, you need to only contribute, I think it's only the equivalent to 5 hours of work. It's 5 or 10. We're pretty lax with that rule, but you need to show some contribution in that year. And like the reason we say like 5 to 10 hours of work is, like updating the README doesn't necessarily probably qualify you to stand for the council, but if you send a few patches or help with the design, few design sessions, whatever, that makes you eligible. So it's not super stringent. Has that created problems before? Maybe. But, ultimately, we'd rather have them be less stringent and more potential passionate people get in than have them be less stringent and more passionate people get in than the opposite. Has money caused problems? If you look at it from a perspective of, is Thunderbird consistently better year over year because of money? The answer is, it hasn't caused that many problems, because like Thunderbird is improving and improving more rapidly, and we're closing the gap between us and other applications like Outlook that exist in the space that are really powerful. I think that the downside is that as you add people who are paid to work on a project, you get unless you really combat it hard, you get less volunteers standing up to do hard things. Because they're like, oh, well, Jim's getting paid, he can do the hard thing. Like, I'll do the little thing over here. I wish that wasn't the case. I think that if there's a future talk, it would be figuring out how we get people to remain engaged at the same level that they would be if we were strictly volunteers. But at this point, we just don't know enough, and we haven't tried enough different things to figure out if that's even possible. So, yeah.
Thank you. I want to preface the question by saying I am a happy Thunderbird user, and this doesn't fit my profile, but I think an elephant in the room here is Mozilla Thunderbird ever going to address webmail? Because there is just an enormous number of people who want to use webmail. They don't want to use a desktop client. Full stop. Is there ever going to be a day where you guys tackle that? Because there are a lot of users that have to settle for proprietary options because there just isn't a good free software webmail.
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is, I imagine that Thunderbird will exist if the trend that you saw continues, or maybe doesn't continue the 1,000% increase, but just even maintains. I imagine that a Thunderbird webmail experience will happen. We're already moving into each mobile platform, Android and iOS. That work, Android is, you can download K9 Mail today, which we adopted and have poured quite a lot of resources into. We're starting an iOS project this year. And to me, there's enough shared, if not code, there's enough shared concepts that we know, and we know really, really well, that we can move on to each major platform as we see it. So we have all the desktop platforms, including FreeBSD and everything. We have Android and iOS in the pipeline, and I think web is the last one that we need to create a presence on in order to say Thunderbird has an email, calendaring, and contact solution for you, regardless of the platform that you're on, which is a goal of mine and a goal of our team, is to be everywhere that the user is. I don't know. I don't have a timeline for that.
Yeah, I got a question. I was impressed with your revenue numbers. They look great. Do you have public information of a breakdown by platform or anything like that?
Yeah, if you go to stats.thunderbird.net, you can see a breakdown by platform. One problem that I have with Linux users that I'm going to air right now. I'm going to look at the live stream. If you are a Thunderbird Linux package maintainer, stop turning off telemetry. We don't know how many Linux users we have because of you. Stop it. You're not helping your cause. We don't know whether we have 2 million Linux users or 500,000. Please turn telemetry back on. Let the user opt out if they want to. Telemetry, guys, we do not collect any PII. We only collect platform and a few other usability data points, not any PII. We need to know how many Linux users there are so we can make decisions about whether or not to solve problems for Linux users over existing problems on other platforms where we do collect telemetry. I believe that there are probably more Linux users on Thunderbird than macOS users on Thunderbird, but the telemetry currently does not say that. And so we make decisions based off of the platforms that we can see and that we know users are on. So, yes, stats.thunderbird.net, and go check your Thunderbird installation, and if telemetry is turned off, please turn it on.
Are Linux users generous? Do they donate more than other platforms, or is it...
Say again, sorry.
Are Linux users generous at all? Do they donate more than other platforms?
Yeah, Linux users are generous. We do have we do see an outsized, for what we can see in telemetry, we do see an outsized representation in donations. So that is very good. Keep donating. You can leave telemetry off if you donate. But yeah, they are. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other relevant stuff there. We receive a lot of feedback from Linux users. And that's going to make you guys laugh, but it is helpful. Like, you know, those folks are the types of folks who are most likely to come and tell us about a bug that exists and tell us in detail, which is useful to your point earlier, George? Yeah, about calendaring. It's really helpful when you have someone who's willing to dig in deep and figure out, like, not just like calendar's not working right, but, you know, I think it's this and that that's causing this issue. So not all bad for Linux. I'm sorry for yelling at you earlier, but turn telemetry on.
Do we have any other questions? All right. Do we have any online questions?
It's okay to give a short answer because this maybe is a question with a long answer.
Go ahead.
We could talk about it later, but how do you own your story? If you realize at a certain point you don't own your story, how do you get from there to a point where you own it?
Yeah.
Like, if there's a bunch of things that people say about your project and, like, I don't know, it's slow or something, and, you know, if you make a blog post saying, oh, well, we're not slow at all, then you sound really defensive. Like, you know, feel free to give a short answer, and then I'll come and talk to you later for a long answer.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. One is tried to be accessible, try to be authentic, and try to be, this last one's hard, try to be everywhere, but that one's extraordinarily hard and you will get burnt out being everywhere. But you kind of have to sometimes. When combating Thunderbird is dead, okay. Each message needs a different strategy around it. For Thunderbird was dead, I said, what's the opposite of dead? It's like really, really alive, like too much alive, you know? And so I was like, Thunderbird just needs to be that for a little while, like go everywhere, talk to everyone, you know, go to a podcast. It's like, what are we talking about today? We're talking about cats. It's like, you know what cats love? Cats love Thunderbird. And just like keep bringing that back, because if they see it everywhere, it can't be dead. If Thunderbird's everywhere, it can't be dead. If, you know, your application is slow, okay, the alternative approach to that probably is, okay, either it's actually slow, okay, which you just have to hit everyone constantly with like, we're making it faster. Here are the things we're doing to make it faster. We're making it faster. And you just keep saying that and saying that and saying that until the other people on the internet who are interested in your story internalize that, and then they will be everywhere for you. Linux is really good at this. Linux projects, open source projects are really good at this. You eventually get a critical mass of people who show up everywhere and say, they repeat your talking points. That's the answer. You need to have your talking points and you need to hit it all the time until people on the internet start posting on Reddit threads for you with your talking points. That sounds trivial, but you see it all the time in open source from time immemorial. Like, you have seen it. It used to be Ubuntu, you know, like you didn't need Mark Shuttleworth, even though sometimes he did show up in, you know, places, but you didn't need him to go and explain what they were doing. Folks would just show up there. It's true of a lot of different things. It still exists for a lot of great open source projects today where folks show up and they tell the story, but you have to have the story down first in your head, and it has to be like your mantra that you wake up with every day and be like, and all of your team has to know it. One thing we struggle with as we've grown as a team is not everyone's telling the same story, which doesn't actually accomplish owning your own story because you can't have more than one. You have to have one at a time. I hope that answers the question. Maybe I can go more in, but I got to think about that a little bit, but I will, for you. Okay.
I've got the microphone. That's me. So I'm just going to ask. I was going to ask 2 questions, but you just answered one of them. The second one is that here in the GNOME community, we have quite a few people who have been advocating for metrics and telemetry for a decent amount of time. And you know that the Linux community is particularly difficult to get that through. So maybe I just, can you just repeat, pointing to the camera again, the message about turning on telemetry, please? We really need to get that.
You know how I talked about owning the story? What everyone here who cares about making good open source software has to do is start actively telling the story. There are, I think, much less people who are really opposed to telemetry, or they're not making their argument in good faith, that are making this really difficult. Because when I asked my team, okay, well, we had people join our team, and somebody restarted the conversation, I remember this, of like, telemetry, like we're collecting telemetry, like why are we doing that? Like that telemetry equals bad, like that's bad. And it's like, my question to them was, okay, well, we're not collecting any user data, we're not even collecting IPs. All we know is what platform are you on, what version of Thunderbird do you have, and I guess there was like, how many times do you click this button in a session? But nothing that doesn't contain any email data or anything like that. It's just, is this button being clicked? And so we went through that. We created a heat map. I think it's heatmap.thunderbird.net, or you can find it. Go on GitHub, go to Thunderbird repos, there's a heat map. We had all these folks who were telling us when we were looking at the context menu, don't change the context menu. Everyone I know uses it, I use it. Do not touch it. And for the longest time, we were like, well, maybe we shouldn't touch it. Like, every time we talk about changing it, like these same people, these come out of the woodworks and they tell us, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. Until we hooked up telemetry to those buttons. And granted, they may have one of these people, or all of them, may have had telemetry turned off, but one of the buttons they were like, don't touch that, had 0 telemetry clicks over the course of a year. 0. So I was like, you're not clicking this button. No one's clicking this button. This button has never been clicked. And we're removing it. When we removed it, no one said anything. Because no one was clicking it. Or they had telemetry shut off. Turn on telemetry. We need to get past this as a community. There's, like the money thing, it's another thing that we fight with our arm behind our back. If we can't know anything about our users who aren't willing to yell at us in the issue tracker, then we will not know enough to compete against the other applications in our space that are proprietary and blah, 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 all the bad things. So, we're just putting this argument behind us as Thunderbird community and saying, we need this data. It's really hard to make any good decisions without it. And you can either, the pitch to make to communities and stakeholders who don't want telemetry is, okay, what happens if we're trying to make a decision and telemetry supports the outcome that you want and we go a different way? The problem is you don't have any data to back up your argument. So you can't say, I use that button is widely used, and actually have anything to back it up, because you may not be the maintainer. You may have a maintainer who's like, I don't care. I don't like that button. It offends me. I don't know why it looks like that, and removes it. And so, you know, it serves everybody to have a common set. This is so 101. Like, it serves everyone to have a common set of data to discuss and make decisions off of. And a community like ours, an open source community, should be embracing that, not you know, shying away from it. Sorry. I get passionate about stuff like that. And do not email me. Do not email me about that. Unless you're telling me you turned telemetry on.
We probably have time for one more question, maybe two. Any last minute questions? Oh, here we go.
This is maybe an out of left field question, but I'm curious. I feel like there's been a rise in like privacy preserving email, like Proton and such, in similar companies where their product is like very privacy focused, and so it's more locked down, and you have to either use a bridge or like set something up locally to get like something like Thunderbird to work. So I'm wondering if you guys are looking at all at like making it easier to integrate with some of these like new, more privacy preserving email services.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's difficult. Like, first off, privacy respecting email and some of the stuff that's happening in that space is like so cool and so great, and I'm so happy that it's happening. To like Proton Mail and projects like it, like Tutanota, I really wish they were engaging with the specs, enhancing IMAP, enhancing or developing a new standard instead of doing non-standard ways of doing this. Even if it's open source, even if the bridge is open source, the problem is that Proton Mail is doing something that is unique to Proton Mail and is not enshrined in a standard. So it makes it really hard to implement the bridge, even if we can look at the source code and copy it, because we don't have the rules of the road. We don't understand how they're making their decisions or what, you know. And so I would ask these folks who are doing this really great work to come and participate in the creation of open standards around the things that they're doing, so we can interoperate but understand a little bit more about, you know, with them the rules of the road and how we're going to do this and how we're going to continue to be interoperable. One thing Georges and I were talking about earlier around calendar is email and calendaring is really under threat as a standard, because Gmail, who is the #1 email provider, Outlook, who is the #1 business, Microsoft, who's the #1 business email provider, and calendar, you know, goes along with that, are not following the standards. So it means like we implement the standard, but then we're like, okay, we wrote that code now, and that's going to work for all the small players. Now we're going to have to rewrite all of that code to support the stuff that Gmail and Outlook are doing, which is really frustrating, because like the beauty of email and the beauty of the way that calendaring on the internet has evolved is that it's open and it's an open standard, and you can interop with people on other, it's like what we want with chat. It's why we're interested in Matrix, right? Like, you want this shared language that allows you to, in a federated way, talk with other people on the internet. And that breakdown and the burden that puts on clients, third parties, et cetera, to integrate is really high. So my only thing is, I love the privacy-focused email. I love the innovation that's happening in that space. I hope that folks like Tutanota and Proton Mail and others will come and participate in the development of standards around these things. Not just around OpenPGP, where they're interested in, but like, if you're gonna if you're going to create a custom protocol by which people connect to their accounts, like turn that into an open standard, and we'll help. We'll help. If you want help, we'll help, so that we can all kind of move forward together on this and create a better email and better calendaring and better all that stuff together. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, guys.